In today's world of IT, no matter if you are a developer, architect, or the administrator, maintaining the security in your organization's resources is your number one priority. So, the task for keeping some of the secrets related to your project, matching the standard as per this industry, is something you should be aware of. Welcome to the world of managed service identity, wherein we are going to discuss how do you manage the credential and how, as a developer, as an architect, or an administrator, you make sure your application code is the secretless code. You do not have any secret in your application. How do you reach to the goal using the managed identity? Hi, my name is Rakesh Suryavanshi. I am a solution architect, work with Accenture, and today we are going to discuss the MSI. MSI, also called Azure Managed Identities. We'll discuss about the Azure Managed Identity. We'll take a couple of scenarios and we'll get to know how do you achieve or implement the managed service identity in your project so that your project or the application code is the industry standard and it makes sure that your application source code does not have any secrets in the application data. MSI stands for Azure Managed Service Identity, also called Azure Managed Identity. Today, we are going to discuss how, as a developer, as an architect, or the administrator, you use the MSI to make sure your application code has the secretless code. You are not maintaining any secrets into your application. This is our course objective. In the objective, we'll discuss why do we need the MSI. Then we also discuss about the types of managed service identity. We'll try to check how do you configure the managed service identity in Azure and how does it works. We'll check how do you configure the secure connection with the help of MSI, and we'll also go through some of the important demonstration which you can use in your project using the MSI. This is going to be a heavily loaded demonstration session in which we'll have multiple demos covering different aspects of your application so that you understand the use of MSI and you practically able to apply the MSI uses in your projects. We'll check a couple of the demos which includes enabling the managed service identity into Azure VM and the storage account, how Azure VM connects to the storage account using the MSI. We'll check how do you use the user managed identity. We'll check how do you use the MSI with the key vault. So the application which is connecting to the key vault, how do you connect to the key vault with the help of managed service identity. We'll also check how your application can be connected to Azure SQL database or any other SQL database with the help of MSI. And at the last, we'll also check how do you connect to the Azure function with the help of MSI, or I should say, how do you connect from Azure function to the other resources using the MSI. So these are the different demonstrations we are going to cover in this particular article. I'll recommend you to continue watching the videos till the end so that you learn different demonstration and the uses of the MSI. Let's first of all understand what is the MSI. As per the definitions of Microsoft, managed service identities eliminates the need for the developers to manage the credential by providing identity for the resources in Azure AD. I'm emphasizing here on the identity for resources in Azure AD. By that means, here with the help of MSI, basically the credentials, you don't need to manage the credential. Azure will make sure that it is enabling the communication between the Azure services. So here we are saying that the MSI works with the services or the Azure service instance who supports the Azure Active Directory authentication mechanism. So any services which supports Active Directory authentication mechanism, MSI would be applicable to them. I'm not saying that all services will have the MSI, but most of them who follows the Azure Active Directory authentication token or Azure AD tokens, the MSI will be available. Even though for the services for which MSI is not available as of now, maybe in the future, by the time you are watching this video, the MSI is available to them as well. Let's first of all understand the scenario 1. In this scenario, I have application hosted on Azure virtual machine, and from the virtual machine, my application is trying to connect to the storage account so that it reads and writes the data into the Azure Blob Storage. Now, to read and write the application data onto the Azure Blob Storage, application uses the Azure Blob Storage connection string or the access key of the storage account, which is by this means that your application needs to store the Azure storage account secrets onto the application settings, right? And whenever it makes calls to the storage account, it creates a connection using the application key, the storage key, and then retrieves the data. But storing a secret on the application configuration file in a plain text is not a good idea. So what should you do? So someone can say that I may go for the key vault option, and it may possible that you store the record or the sensitive information, in this case the storage connection string, into the key vault, and now your application is connecting to the key vault to read the secret information, then it makes connection to the storage account and read and write to the blob storage. This works well, but even to manage the credential into the key vault, you need to connect to the key vault via some service principal, which is again the secret itself. So if that service principal secret is going to be compromised, someone may have access to the entire key vault, which is again going to be a security risk. So what would be the best option? The best option in this case is to assign the managed identity on the Azure virtual machine instance itself. Once you assign the managed identity onto the Azure virtual machine instance, your communication which goes from your application or from the virtual machine instance to the storage account, the communication from the virtual machine to the storage account will go via the role-based access control with the help of managed service identity. So you'll have the dedicated identity created in the Azure Active Directory, and anytime when you make a communication to the storage account, Active Directory will create the Azure AD token with the help of managed identity, and the Active Directory token will be validated at the RBAC role based assignment at the storage account at the destination, and once the validation or the authorization is completed, you will have the access to read and write in the storage account. I'll show you in the detail how this works, but this is just for the sample demonstration. Now, we say that MSI helps you to enable the secure communication with the Azure AD token, and the Azure AD token, creation of the token between the two different Azure instance or service instance will be managed by Microsoft itself. But when we enable the MSI onto the any of the Azure service instance, by enabling the MSI, it just enabled the authentication parts. It means by enabling the MSI, whenever your service instance is trying to connect to the other service instance with the help of MSI, the MSI helps you to create the Active Directory token, which is your authentication part, which is part 1 in this section. But when it goes and try to connect to the target instance of your service, you need to assign the appropriate role on the target instance from source to target so that the communication works fine, which is your authorization part. If you do not assign the authorization using the RBAC, then your MSI will not work. So MSI, to work the whole as an MSI concept, you need to have a understanding of two pieces. One is the authentication part, which comes with enabling the MSI on the service instance itself, and the second one is the authorization part, which is assigning the RBAC appropriate role on the target service on which you are trying to connect. And then once you have these two pieces joined together, your application will work fine. Now let's understand what are the different types of managed identity. We have two different types of managed identity. One is the system identity and second one is the user assigned identity. Now let's look at the system assigned identity. System assigned identity basically assigned directly onto the Azure service instance. So as soon as you assign the system assigned identity, it will be applicable or assigned to the particular instance of the service, Azure service. For example, if I'm going to assign the managed identity on the storage account, then it will be applicable on that particular storage account instance. Next, Azure creates an Azure Active Directory Active Directory identity in Azure AD. What do I mean by this is, as soon as you create the MSI, basically there will be a service principal created for you for that particular service, Azure service instance in the Active Directory. So let's say if I am going to enable the MSI for virtual machine instance VM1, then there will be a service principal created in Active Directory for me, and that particular service principal will be used for any communication between that particular instance to the target instance, right? Now, what about the life cycle of the system assigned identity? So basically the life cycle remains till the life cycle of the resource instance itself. So for example, as long as I have the VM instance available in my subscription, the life cycle of the managed identity is available. So if I'm going to, let's say, delete the VM instance, then the managed system identity will be deleted itself by Microsoft. I don't need to do anything extra for that. Let's discuss about the user assigned identity. User assigned identity basically is the standalone Azure service. So what do I mean by that? It's not basically associated to the service instance. For example, I cannot create the user assigned identity to a given instance. I need to create a separate service as a Azure user assigned identity, and once I have that particular service instance, then I can attach the user assigned identity to any of the Azure instance, right? Again, once you create the user assigned identity, it creates the similar service principal in Active Directory tenant. Now, the life cycle or the difference between the system assigned identity and the user assigned identity could be a single user assigned identity, which is again a separate service, can be assigned to multiple resources, whereas in the case of service system assigned identity, a single MSI is applicable to that particular instance. At the same MSI identity or the identity key or so this principal key cannot be used for the separate service, whereas in the user assigned identity you create that particular key and attach the key to multiple Azure instances, so it can be reusable basically. Yeah. Now the life cycle, again, it's not managed or it's not a life cycle of the user assigned identity is not associated to the Azure instance on which this is associated to or attached to. The life cycle is managed to the resource itself, because this user assigned identity is a resource itself. So if you want to deallocate the user assigned identity, you need to deallocate the resource itself, the user assigned identity resource itself. Now it's time for our first demonstration. In our first demonstration, we'll have a virtual machine. We'll create a virtual machine, we'll assign to a system assigned identity, and we'll have a storage account. And we will see how we can use the managed service identity to connect to the storage account without using any username and password, or without using storage account connection string or the application settings, right? This is what this first demonstration will see.